America True.
Tom Baker's Ultimate Sci-Fi Quiz. Here is yet another DVD quiz game, this time all about sci-fi media, but this one actually has a few things to set it apart from the pack. For one, it has some pretty swank production values. Secondly, it's hosted by Tom Baker, the former Doctor Who star who is somehow incredibly charming and incredibly creepy at the same time. It even has a narrative. You've been thrown into deep space by a black hole and have to answer sci-fi trivia questions correctly to make it back to Earth. As silly as the premise is, the game leans into it, and there is even a bonus bit of world-building fluff to check out from the main menu. It has the usual quiz DVD problem of repeating questions only after a game or two, probably because of all the video and audio they recorded of Baker taking up space on the disc, but this can be mitigated by not always picking the same categories, of which there is a decent variety. So yes, this has personality, production values, good questions, and overall could be a fun way for some sci-fi buffs to spend an evening or two. Oh, it also supports one player, which I appreciated as someone with no friends. QI, a quite interesting game. Based on the BBC show Quite Interesting, this is basically a super hard quiz with very obscure questions. The format is that Stephen Fry asks you a bunch of questions related only by a word association, and at the end of the category you'll get a letter. Finish all the categories and you have enough letters to form an anagram to solve, which you could then enter onto the QI website, which did something? All of the questions are multiple choice, but the game lets you attempt any question as much as you like. There is one big catch though. Some questions have more than one correct answer, and if you pick what is deemed to be the least interesting of the two, or three, you won't be given a letter at the end of the round and have to repeat the entire category. They don't tell you this happened until the end of the round, and they don't tell you which question or questions you got wrong. Now this is actually faithful to the show, which has a hidden scoring system that no one understands, but in practice here, it's incredibly annoying. But what is even more annoying is Fry calling you an idiot in a variety of obnoxious ways. I've been a fan of him for a long time, and this started to make me strongly dislike him. Oh, another interesting thing is that this is one of the few DVD quiz games I've played made for solely one player. Also, each category is a string of pre-recorded questions, so you don't get any repeats, which I prefer. So yes, I do admire them trying to bring some of what makes QI to this DVD, but in practice it's pretty tedious and just feels like it wastes your time. I also found a lot of the questions to actually not be quite interesting, though there are a lot of them, and they're all video questions asked by Fry himself. I much preferred the second DVD in the QI series, which I'll talk about now. QI, Come Strictly Duncing. So here we have another QI DVD, and this one is vastly better in my opinion. For one thing, it's much more lively in both its presentation and in the writing and questions. There is still some hidden scoring, but it's handled much better. You either get points for answering correctly, no points for picking a wrong answer, or lose points if you pick an answer deemed to be very wrong or predictable. It also supports a second player this time around, but the solo game is where this really sold me. Why? It's because you play against Alan Davies, a regular on the show who is known to be a bit of a dope. After you answer a question, it will show you a video of him taking a crack at it, as well as showing his reaction when the answer is revealed. The reason this works so well is because A, he often gets questions wrong, which makes you not feel so bad about having no idea what the answer to most of the questions are yourself, and B, watching his "what in the actual hell" reactions to the answers made me laugh out loud quite a few times. As with the last DVD, all the questions are preset in categories, but there are a lot to choose from, so there's plenty of content here. plus this way it avoids questions repeating themselves. Oh, and once again, it's hosted by Stephen Fry, but this time there is none of his obnoxiousness. I'll be keeping this one. It's not only quite fun, but also quite interesting. Spicks and Specks Interactive Quiz. This is based on the Australian music trivia show of the same name, and it does a great job of replicating it. It even has Myth. Everyone loves Myth. Anyway, this quiz DVD avoids the repeating question problem by going the episodic route. By this, I mean there are different quote-unquote episodes to pick which have the same questions every single time. This may seem like a problem for replay value, but there are 36 episodes, so there is plenty of content here, and frankly, it's better than having questions repeat constantly after only playing one time. This also helps the DVD feel much more like the show, as each episode has an actual structure. I will note that there are segments which feel like they may have random questions that could repeat, but I'm not certain. Many of the segments from the show are here, such as trying to identify songs after hearing weird covers, or taking a piece of literature and singing it to the tune of a song, and your teammates have to guess the correct track. The latter segment requires a bunch of cards included with the game to play. This is clever because not only does it keep teammates from accidentally singing the song, it also allows the performer to flip through cards until they find a song they actually know. Oh, and the game even includes physical buzzers. Really, this is a top-notch production, and if you're a fan of the show or music trivia in general, I think it's worth checking out. I just wish there were more questions about the avant-garde nonsense I listen to. You know, like Aphex Twin, or somebody dropping ball bearings on sheet metal for an hour. Now that's what I call music. Havoc Interactive. Here's a fun concept. It's basically another DVD quiz game, but this time it shows you a clip of what could be moments before disaster, and you have to guess what happens next out of the 3 options it gives you. Sometimes a driver might steady themselves on the track and keep going, other times they'll blip through the air 20 times. Of course, it will only show you the second half of the clip if you get the question correct, and I assume and hope that all the drivers involved in the crashes recovered fine, though some are pretty rough. Still, it's pretty fun trying to guess what happens next, but there are 2 problems with this DVD. First, the production values are really low, but that's not a big deal to me. The real problem I had with it is that about half of the questions are about motorsport knowledge rather than guessing the outcome of a clip. I don't care about that, that's boring. So, this might be a fun game for fans of cars and bikes, but it unfortunately didn't make it past the finish line into my permanent collection. Oh, there is actually a third problem. The questions are in the same order every time, severely limiting any replay value. Oh, I almost forgot. My favourite thing is that the front of the DVD claims it's fun for the whole family, but some of these crashes are really violent, so I wouldn't exactly agree with that. Red Dwarf, Beat the Geek. It's time for another quiz DVD, this time based on the UK sci-fi comedy show Red Dwarf, of which I'm a very big fan. So the main attraction for Red Dwarf fans is that this features lots of new material recorded by Norman Lovett and Hattie Hayridge, who play different incarnations of the character Holly on the show. It's obvious that Norman enjoyed being back in the role, and he does a good job of being host, but Hattie's performance feels a little phoned in, though it could also be that the writers just didn't give her as good material to work with. Anyway, as mentioned, this is a quiz all about Red Dwarf. Well, not quite, but I'll get to that later. You pick your host, pick if you're playing with 1 or 2 players, and then each player picks separate difficulty levels. There is one for casual Red Dwarf fans, and another for fans who know things like, oh I don't know, which member of the show's tech crew was an extra in some random episode. Now, far from all the questions are that obtuse, but that is definitely one that I got. You then go through 8 rounds of questions, each taking place at a different location on the mining ship Red Dwarf. There are questions where you have to watch a clip, or listen to audio, or simply answer a text question. There's also a type of question where you have to put different pictures in the correct sequence of events. These were the only questions I didn't like, as I found it hard to make out the pictures. I mentioned that this isn't just a Red Dwarf game, as players can also pick a general knowledge category, which seems very odd to me. I guess you could say that you're getting 2 games in one, and you could play it with people who aren't familiar with the show. But why would you play this with non-Red Dwarf fans? In my opinion, I think it would have been better just to load in more Red Dwarf related material. Another potential problem is that the 2-player game goes on for quite some time, roughly 1 hour. Tom Baker's game also had this issue too, which I forgot to mention. It would have been nice if both offered a shorter game option. Those problems aside, if you're a Red Dwarf fan, this is a bit of fun. The production values are also top notch, and there are lots of questions, though it does suffer from the usual repeating question syndrome. Another very cool thing is that depending on how well you do, the game will give you codes which unlock games in an arcade. This is a great way to encourage replaying the game, even though it's quite easy to access the games via exploring the disc on a PC. Unfortunately, though the games have very fun presentation, they're not too great to play. The types of game on offer are a whack-a-mole clone, a maze game, and memory style games. Basically, they're the same kind of games you'd find on a kid's DVD, but with a Red Dwarf theme and higher difficulty. Still, I think it's a great idea, even if the execution leaves a bit to be desired. Another thing I'll mention is that the DVD comes with a pamphlet for an online Red Dwarf ARG, with the prize being £5,000, although I'm pretty sure that competition has ended by now. So yes, I'd recommend this to Red Dwarf fans, but no one else. I'll be keeping my copy. Charades, starring the Umbilical Brothers. Here's something a bit unusual. It's charades, except players don't act out anything. Instead, Australian physical comedy duo the Umbilical Brothers do all the acting, and players just do the guessing. I'm actually a very big fan of their work, and even saw their most recent live show last year, and it was fantastic. Unfortunately, this DVD isn't an example of their best work. I mean, it's still entertaining watching them act out charades with their modern mime stylings, but not many made me actually laugh. Also, there is something about this game of charades that will annoy a lot of people. The brothers use sounds in their acting. Now, making amusing noises is a big part of their bit, but as most people know, you're not supposed to use sounds in charades. And this game shows why. About 80% of the charades are incredibly easy to guess because of the noises. I should also mention the odd way this game works. Each team has a board and a set of reusable stickers. When players correctly guess a charade, they roll a dice that has a bunch of body parts listed on it. They then stick that body part on their board, and whoever completes a body first wins the game. Of course, it's possible to roll a body part you already have, and there are some events where you randomly gain or lose a body part. Sometimes a charade comes up that anyone can guess, and whoever is quickest wins, but I think the whole game should be played like that instead of teams/players taking turns, as it makes the game much more exciting, especially considering how easy a lot of the charades are. So, as much as I like the brothers, it's hard to recommend this game. I mean, it's okay I suppose, but I suggest buying one of their comedy shows on DVD instead of this. Still, if you see this for a few bucks, I'm sure you'd get a bit of entertainment out of it.